everyone, and welcome to the first episode of the Rec Room here at Krimson University. I'm your host, Krimson, and this series is going to be a podcast series where I'm going to be talking with myself and sometimes other people about typical questions and topics within the fighting game community and gaming in general, mostly fighting games, but hey, that's what the series is going to be for. It's going to sometimes be live, it's going to sometimes be recorded. We're going to see how it works out. And sometimes when I want to voice my opinion and not have it be a actual fact or anything like that, I'm going to voice it here. Because I'm going to talk a little bit more freely. Sometimes it will feel scripted, but that's just because I have the way that I write my notes on these subjects, so I'm going to read it like it's a script. But I'm going to try to still be as genuine as possible when I'm doing solo podcasts like this. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. I really hope you listen to this episode. I'm super excited, and thank you so much. And with that being said, I would like to dive into today's topic, and it's something that I think doesn't really get enough attention, and that's indie fighting games and why they matter so much in the fighting game community. Now, when people think about the FGC, they usually think of the heavy hitter games like Street Fighter, Tekken, Mortal Kombat, Guilty Gear. The list goes on. Those are the games that headline at like EVO and Combo Breaker. Those are the games that get the giant trailers at Game Awards for seasons of DLC and just the announcements. But underneath those giants, there is a whole world of smaller fighting games, projects made by tiny studios, sometimes even solo developers, that are keeping the genre alive and pushing it forward in ways that those big names don't always manage to. So today I want to break down why indie fighting games aren't just cool little side projects, but that they're essential to the FGC and honestly, I think to the future of fighting games. So first things first, what do I mean when I say indie fighting games? So we're talking about fighting games that are made outside of the AAA studios, outside of Capcom and Bandai Namco and Arc Systems. Games that are built on smaller budgets, often crowdfunded, or made by passionate teams of a handful of people, and yet despite being small in scale, they bring so much heart and creativity to the table. Some examples of games like this are Skullgirls, which started out as a crowdfunded project and is still going stronger than it has been in the past few decades. Rivals of Aether, which was a platform fighter that spun into its own little esports scene, and even just recently got a sequel within the past year. Them Fighting Herds, which started out as a My Little Pony fan game, and then transformed into something very unique, to even Yomi Hustle, which blew up online as a turn-based cinematic anime battle fighter. Each of these games came from small beginnings, but they've all left their mark in the FGC in different ways. And chances are, if you've been around the scene, you've at least seen one of them pop up in a tournament or on your Steam recommendations. So you may be asking yourself, why do indie fighting games matter so much? So let's dig into that. First is innovation and experimentation. Big franchises have a lot of history and baggage, and they can't take too many risks because they have massive fan bases with certain expectations that indie developers don't have that problem. They can actually swing for the fences on ideas. Take, for example, Rivals of Aether. They added a elemental mechanic, which gave platform fighters a whole new layer of depth. Yomi Hustle said, what if fighting games were turn-based and cinematic? And people ate that up. And you even have Fantasy Strike, which dropped the complicated motion inputs of quarter circle forward, the Z motion, and half circles, and made it more accessible by doing simple controls, similar to a Smash Brothers style move list. These are ideas that the big studios would never gamble on at first, but when indies prove that they work, those concepts often trickle upward, and that's how progress happens. Second is accessibility and community-driven design. Indie fighting games have been pioneers in making fighting games more welcoming. A lot of them launched with a rollback netcode at a time when major franchises were just dragging their feet. Skullgirls is famous for its tutorials, some of the best in the genre, teaching players fundamentals in a way that even new Street Fighter games struggle to match. By making their games easier to get into, indie games help bring new blood into the FGC, and more players mean a healthier community for everyone. Third is representation and diversity. Indie fighting games don't stick to the cookie cutter formula of karate man, wrestler, ninja, boxer. They get weird and they get creative, and they bring in perspectives that we don't usually see. Like, look at them fighting herds. That game gave us llamas, goats, and magical animals, and yet it's still a legit competitive fighter. Fantasy Strike built accessibility for disabled players right into its design. You even have Skullgirls, which built a cast that didn't even look like a normal fighting game roster, which is crazy. All of these make the community more inclusive. More people feel like they have a place in the FGC because they see themselves represented in some way, shape, or form. And finally, indies keep the FGC alive between major releases. Think about how long it takes between a Street Fighter or a Tekken or a Guilty Gear to get made. The answer is years. I believe Street Fighter V came out in 2015, and Street Fighter VI just came out in 2023. So between those gaps, there have been a ton of indie fighting games that came out that keep the genre fresh and exciting. Like, look at Skullgirls. Skullgirls kept showing up at tournaments long after its release. Rivals of Aether built its own competitive scene separate from the usual lineup. And these games fill the space between the big releases and keep people engaged in the genre. Now, it's not all sunshine and rainbows, unfortunately. Indie fighting games do face real challenges. First off is that the player bases are smaller, which means that matchmaking can be tough. Without big publisher money, marketing is limited, so a lot of great games just never get the visibility they deserve. And when you're competing against decade-old franchises like Street Fighter and Tekken, it's really easy to get overshadowed, unfortunately. Iron Saga Versus is a good example here. It's polished, it's stylish, it's fun, and yet a lot of people don't even know that this game exists. I actually got to play this at Combo Breaker, and that game was nuts. Like, this game looks so good, yet nobody knows that this game exists. But here's the thing though, despite those challenges, these games still build dedicated communities. They still show up at tournaments, they still push the genre forward, and that's why community-supported games matter so much. When the players buy these games, stream them, or enter tournaments for them, we're literally keeping those games alive. It's what I do on this channel. It's literally why I love indie fighting games so much, because of the fact that they really just drive this community forward in ways that the AAA games aren't really doing as much. So what about the future of these games? Where do indie fighting games go from here? Well, if history tells us anything, the next big trend in fighting games could easily come from an indie studio. Remember rollback netcode? Big companies only started taking it seriously after indie games proved it was possible and demanded by the community. I think where we see innovation coming from the indie side, we're going to see things like crossplay being more integrated into indie games, hybrid genres, like we had a look at Polyfighters where it's a fighting game mixed with roguelike elements, and we're going to have a little bit more accessibility baked into the design of these games from day one. But who knows? The next iconic mechanic or beloved competitive scene might start from some single developer sitting in their office into a game that's going to hit the main stage at EVO, like them fighting herds and Skullgirls. So really, at the end of the day, guys, indie developed fighting games aren't just side projects, they're the backbone of creativity in the FGC. They're the ones that are experimenting with mechanics, making the genre more welcoming, and keeping the scene alive between these big releases. If you love fighting games, please support your indie developers. By supporting indies means that you're supporting the future of the genre, and it's not just important, it's essential to keep these communities thriving. So that's going to be it for today's episode, but I want to hear from you though. What's your favorite indie fighting game? Which one do you think deserves more love? Hit me up on my socials in the comments below and let's talk about it. Thank you guys so much for tuning in for this episode of The Rec Room. I'll catch you next time. Stay awesome in everything you do, and remember, good gaming, God bless, go beyond, and keep on keeping on.